As AI models and agentic systems consume more APIs, every organization is asking the same questions. Are our APIs secure? Do we have the right role-based access control, or RBAC, to ensure each identity can perform only the operations it is permitted to? Secure APIs in higher environments can only be tested when their security is exercised. In this demo, we'll see Specmatic run tests against an API as it is actually secured, supplying credentials, negotiating OAuth tokens, and exercising both authentication and RBAC controls. Typically, in production mode, the application negotiates an authorization code grant with an auth server, gets a token back, and is able to make an authenticated call to the API. The API can then validate the auth token and handle the request, return a response. In test mode, Specmatic replaces the application. Now, usually, while testing, authentication and authorization flows are not exercised, but Specmatic does have a way to exercise these flows and negotiate authorization code grants. And then it can use the token to make an authenticated call. The API can then validate it with an actual auth server and handle the response because auth is really wired up. Let's see how this works. Let's take a look at the Docker Compose file for this demo. We have the Vault service that holds secrets, the Keycloak service that acts as the auth service, the Order API service, which is the system under test and is wired up to talk to the Keycloak service, and Specmatic tests, which runs the test from the API specification. Note that it uses secrets imported from Vault. Now let's take a quick look at the API specification from which tests will be run. You can see a set of APIs for the CRUD operations on orders. So creating, fetching details, modifying and deleting orders. These operations are all secured using an RBAC scheme. Let's take a closer look to understand how that works. So this is the operation for creating an order. As you can see, it's secured using OAuth 2 with the order write scope. And the operation for updating an order is secured in much the same way. The get operations are secured here using basic authentication. There's a special API key that has to be used for deleting an order. Below this, you can see the products APIs. There's a similar set of operations for products, and the RBAC for products APIs is much the same. One interesting thing to note, though, is that the RBAC system in this application has been set up with two roles. The user, which can create orders, but cannot insert products into the backend, and the service account, which can create products, but cannot create orders on behalf of users. Specmatic can exercise both of these roles in its tests, as we'll see in a short while. Let's run the tests. "185 tests ran and 33 failed. All right, let's see what's going on. Let's scroll down to the API for creating orders and let's see what's happened. It looks like we were expecting a 201, but we got a 401. And if you see why, the authorization header was sending a dummy token, and it was naturally rejected by the auth server. This is just a placeholder that was there in the example file in this test. And there actually are several other tests that have failed for a similar reason. We need to put meaningful values here for authorization to succeed. Let's take a closer look at the example for creating an order. This is the one that powered the tests for order creation, where there was a dummy token that we saw, and the test returned a 401, so we expected 201. What we need here is to negotiate a token with the right role for this order so that we get a token that can post orders. We can't just use a token created once for all from scratch because there is RBAC in the system. So let's do this. The first thing we do is put in a before fixture that makes an API call to Keycloak. But note here that we are configuring a Keycloak username and a Keycloak user password. And the usernames and passwords here that we're talking about are for users. This is the role essentially that can create or essentially write to orders. And what the syntax means is look for an environment variable named Keycloak user username. And if you find it, use it. And the same with the password. Okay. And essentially this API call will go out to Keycloak, and what we get back is a response that looks like this. And what we're saying here is, take this value, this is the access token, store it in a variable named access token, and then further down in the example, what we're going to do is we're going to say, use this access token here. And now what will happen is this authorization header will have an actual freshly negotiated access token for the application to process. We've modified a few of the other API calls so that anything that needs OAuth to work, it's going to work. Another case before we run the tests again is the forbidden test, because we need to trigger a 403 here. The test really wants a 403 response. And so what we've done to get a forbidden, which essentially means the role mismatches with the operation we're trying to perform, is we try to get the Keycloak service account username and Keycloak service account password. And that's the authentication that's happening. So when we get the access token back, this is essentially the service account access token that isn't supposed to be creating orders on behalf of users. And that's the token that we're going to be passing here to the order creation API. And so we're going to see, we should be seeing a 403 over here coming back in the response. Now let's just try to run the test and see what happens. Okay, so the number of test failures has come down from 33 to 15. Let's see in the report what's happened. So we scroll to post orders and we see the tests have passed. So let's open one of the tests. And we see that this time there is an actual username, not a dummy, and a password. These have been fetched, if you remember, from Vault. And we actually get this auth token, this access token back that gets used here. And now the test passes. The other tests of this nature have, passed as well. Let's also quickly take a look before moving forward at the 403. You can see that this one has passed as well because we've done the service account authentication, as you can see here. And this is the access token that we've gotten back and sent it in the request to the API. And we have gotten back the 403 as forbidden. And this is how you can use authentication tokens to actually test whether your RBAC is really working in your application or not. As we scroll through the report, we see a number of operations still have failing tests. Let's take a look, for example, at this get for orders. Quite a number of failing tests. Let's see what's gone wrong. We expect a 200, but we get a 401 back. We're sending basic. Somehow the application doesn't seem very happy with this token. Let's actually see what's happened here. Just do a quick decode. Well, it turns out this is the default user, and it's coming from right here. What we're essentially saying in specmatic.yaml, as you can see, this is the configuration for running tests. And what we're saying is, for basic auth, the token is to be looked up in this environment variable. You've seen the syntax before. And if you don't find it, use this value. In fact, API key auth is doing the same thing. And so the tests for delete that require a special API key would also have failed. Now, let's go to Docker Compose and add a line to import static secrets from Vault. These secrets will now be used here and for the API key. Now let's run the test again and see if anything's changed. There you go, all tests passing. Let's take a closer look at the report. The report shows the same. So let's look at the get for orders. Open that up, and as you can see, the basic auth token has now been accepted, and the test is passed. Coming back to the questions we started with, how can you ensure that your APIs are secure and that they enforce the right RBAC? Specmatic turns the security definitions of the API spec into executable tests. It verifies basic auth and API keys, dynamically obtains OAuth tokens and uses them in protected requests, and validates RBAC for both permitted and forbidden operations. And because Specmatic can replace the application using the API specification, these security flows can be exercised even before the application is available. And that gives teams repeatable evidence that APIs authenticate identities correctly and authorize them to do exactly what they should and nothing more.